Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 2, Episode 4 of Shadow and Bone. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So first and foremost, let's start off with everything in Ketterdam with Kaz and the crew. Obviously, it's them orchestrating their plan going against Pekka. And obviously in this episode, we finally kind of learned the truth about, well, I mean, we got a good chunk of it last episode, but now get the full scope of everything this episode about what happened to Kaz, what happened to his brother. Once again, they were on the street, they had nothing, and they put everything into Pekka's scam, and they were out on the streets, and when the firepox came, his brother died from it. I think from what we could see, he had it too, and because we know he got dumped with all the other bodies because they probably assumed he died, but he survived it and probably came out stronger because of it. But regardless, they're orchestrating their plan. I even love Jesper being like, oh yeah, like I know what you're going to say. The fact is we're like brothers and yeah, we're going to argue. And the fact of the matter is when you kind of get everything repaired, I'm going to have like a large open tab, right? And it's like, well, the tab's not going to be endless like you said, but everything else is true. So I was like, all right, let's make nice. Let's pull this plan off. Basically his plan, which is pretty ingenious. I was wondering, because I thought he was having Waylon make things that were kind of like fake bombs, because it's like, right, we know chemicals is this thing, which it still plays into it, but I was thinking like maybe fake explosives, because whatever it was, you knew he was saying like, can it make it look real? And then later on when the quote firepox starts spreading, I was like, that's what it is. You wanted to make people think the firepox was spreading, and what the plan was to make it seem like it came from Pekka, because hey, it starts in your harbor, and the only facilities and places in Ketterdam affected in the barrel is your places of business, so it makes it seem like you brought it here, so all of it would fall on him, destroy his reputation and stuff like that, because being the reason why a plague came back to the barrel was going to be like your it was going to be kind of the end. You'd suffer a lot of like financial loss for it. We also had the whole situation with Nina, and I guess in the grand scheme of things it makes perfect sense that Nina would have saw through Pekka's lie, because once again, she's a heart render. She can tell when someone is lying through their teeth because of the heart rate increases. But the moment she punched Kaz and then took him to Pekka, I was like, they're in on this, aren't they? Like, this whole thing's a setup, especially the way Nina was kind of looking around. Yeah, I was like, this is a whole thing's a setup. She let him know what was what. He's the one that's like, right, you got to make it real. So the sale, like the betrayal, because it's also like, right, Pekka doesn't have the power and pull to get Matthias out of jail. He's lying to you. But the moment I run things, I'm going to basically be able to kind of remedy the situation. So she ended up choosing Kaz's side. Kaz, interestingly enough, had this conversation with Inej where it's like, hey, we do what we got to do, and then we're going to meet up afterwards, and if this all goes sideways, I need you to leave here, go try and find your brother, and never look back. But for Inej, it's like, the one thing I can promise you is that Pekka will be begging on his knees, like, you know. And like, I think that meant a lot for Kaz to hear her say that, like, right, I'm not going to leave you. Like, this is all going to work out. It's going to be fine. And the plan, generally speaking, did work out. Inej did save some family that was kind of held up inside of one of the ships. I guess they were being trafficked or whatever. But Kaz is getting the ever-living crap beat out of him until the sirens go off and Kaz's plan is revealed. Obviously, none of them, like, obviously, Waylon was like, yeah, it'll last a day or so, long enough for people to think it's real. But then he was able to kind of put everything on Pekka, and Pekka could have killed him, but it's like, oh, no, you won't do that because I have your son, Albie. And it's like, yeah, so you can kill me, but then there's no guarantee you'll ever find your son. I'm like, Kaz's talking bit, and I was like, there's no way Kaz was actually going to actually do that, because he actually made a promise to Waylon. Kaz can be a right bastard and he can come off really, really evil, but I was wondering, would he really do it? Yes, this is about his revenge, but would he really mix up a innocent child in all of this in that regard? It's like, I figured he was bluffing, but Pekka couldn't take the chance. And the entire time Kaz is reminding him, like, let me tell you who I am and what this is all about. And he tries to justify saying, like, right, it was so long ago. And if it wasn't me conning you, it was someone else. But that's the thing. It doesn't matter. It could have been someone else. Maybe it could have been someone else in this situation. It didn't have to be you, but you still did what you did. You took advantage of some kids and you took everything that they have left. Orphans who had nothing, who, you know, a brother who was just trying to make sure that him and his little brother were taken care of. They can make enough money so that they could survive. So yeah, you took advantage of that. Yes, it could have easily been someone else that conned him, but at the end of the day, it was you. You did this, and his death is on you. And that was my big question too, was whether or not Pekka directly killed him or indirectly, because you screwed us over, because you conned us over. It left us on the street and my brother couldn't get the medical attention he needed. Maybe if gotten the medical attention he needed at the time, maybe he could have survived, or at the very least we wouldn't have been on the street and he would have never contracted the firepox. So it's like, right, remember my brother's name. But for him, it's like, it's been so long ago. He remembers where they're from and everything, who they were that he conned, but he doesn't remember their name because they're just more pigeons to him, as he kind of referred to it as. And it's like, Kaz is like, right, he's like, I'm begging you, please. And I was like, are you begging? Made him get on his knees. And I think this is also the first time Nina and Jesper, because the only one who knows about why Kaz is doing all this is Inej. And now it's like, I think Jesper and Nina overheard, and like, they're hearing this story for the first time, understanding what's motivating Kaz. And Kaz made him sign, like, oh, that constable that died, and Helen, like, you're going to take responsibility, you're going to confess to that, and you're going to free Inej from her obligations to the menagerie. And it's like, right, this is where your son is. He's in this particular cemetery. You're going to need all your men to go dig him up. But the moment they got there, the cops arrest him for everything he did. But then his son shows up, which was the driver. The driver was meant to kind of drive him around long enough and show up at the last minute, show like, yeah, his son was never in any danger. That's what the driver part that Inej was supposed to do, but she got to it late because she was dealing with that mother and her children. But yeah, like, and it still can play into the thing that I talked about last episode, this cycle of revenge, because seeing his father under that situation, it could be a situation of that could eventually lead to, I mean, his father isn't dead. His father's locked up for what he's done. He is a criminal. He's a terrible human being. But I think the suffering is that moment what Kaz gave to him of like, hey, you thought your son was in danger, and now also your son gets to watch you get dragged away. So maybe that kind of plays into the twofold of like, no, I don't, you got to live with the shame of you got arrested in front of your son, being torn away from your son. You're going to be separated from him. That is your suffering. Just like he was torn away from his brother. At least you're alive. Maybe your son will get to visit you in prison, but you'll never be free, you know, after everything that you've done. So in the aftermath of everything, there's also the situation with Jesper and Waylon. We kind of find out from Waylon's perspective why he kind of bailed on Jesper. It's like, well, I know who you are. Like, you know, let's face it, Jesper's a man whore. And it's like, you have a reputation for just disappearing. And even Jesper admits, honestly, me being who I am, and even I recognize my reputation, I can't blame you for acting that way. Because Waylon was like, I just wanted to do that because I thought like, hey, who knew? Like, for one, I figured you were going to do it to me. So it's kind of like that thing of, oh, I'd rather break it off with you before you break it off with me, because it's my way of kind of like softening the blow to my heart. But also he's like, you know, I thought it wouldn't mean much to you. But Jesper admits like, yeah, I most likely would have done that. But the difference is now I know you. So, and they get to fooling around. So it seems like that is going to turn into potentially something serious. So that's going to be interesting. And then we had the ending with like, well, not the ending, but like that side of things with Kaz and Inej, where Kaz calls her like, you know, a weak link, because he was freaking out because he's like, right, because you didn't follow the plan, because you went to look after some family, I didn't know where you were. I didn't know if Pekka had like hired someone. Like he was like worried, like what if Pekka had gotten to you first and foremost? And Inej is like, no, I'm fine. But it's like, no, I can't have any weak links in my crew. And the moment he said that, it's like, we know what it is. Kaz is kicking her out because it's like, right, you wanted your freedom. Now you get to go off and help the Saints. So maybe she'll do that now that she's free of like all obligations, even to Kaz. But it's because Kaz loves her and cares about her, and he wants to keep her away from all of this. Because what did he tell her last episode? It's like, oh, what is your weakness? He was like, the cane and the limp is what people think, but if you were really only, no one's been smart enough to realize what it actually is. And he knows what his own weakness is, and he knows it's a Nej, because he made that whole point about Pekka of like, hey, the problem is living the lifestyle you are, being who you are. Your weakness is you found something you cared about. So what he said to Pekka also reflected on him, because he knows how important a Nej is to him. And it's like, right, to keep her out of this so that she doesn't get dragged in any more stuff of his. It's like, right, you're free of me. Go do whatever you need to do, whether it's look for your brother, whether it's that in conjunction with helping Alina. I mean, because that's what he wanted to do. She wanted to do once she was free, once she was settled with all this, was to go by Lena's side. So I definitely think we could see that happening in the future. But Kaz definitely did that because Nej is his weakness, and he had to let her go, you know? That's the only way you can kind of survive being kind of the top dog in this place, so... We shall see where things kind of go from there. And I don't know if Nej read into it that way, and it's like, right, if you can't be more honest with your feelings, then I shouldn't stick around anyway, or she took what he said at face value. We'll ultimately have to wait until we catch up with Nej to kind of find out, like, how she interpreted that, whether she saw through Kaz's, like, attempt at pushing her away. But, you know, it most likely was successful. The question is, does she see through it and still leaves because it's like, right, you need to be more honest with your feelings? Or does she take it at face value of, he calls me the weak link, and just because I'm dragging the gang down, and it needs to be about, oh, so some people in the Crow have to be people I trust. He trusts her more than anyone in the world. So, like I said, we'll see how that plays out. Catching up with Kerrigan again, we see the state Jinya is in. Like, her face is scarred up, and her attempts to use her tailor abilities to fix it is just like Kerrigan. And it was interesting because basically it's kind of what I thought with why Kerrigan's wounds won't heal, because they're made from the like, yes, the Volcra are humans, but they were also made into the Volcra because of, like, basically magic, and those magical wounds are too deep and too, like, magical to be fixed. And so Jinya is stuck with her scars just like he is, and she is kind of, I don't know if it's 100% vain on her part, but it's like, yeah, like, her beauty was kind of ripped from her. The interesting thing though is, and I don't know how, because I made a nerd, when I did my nerd mode for Shadow and Bone, I was, Googling pictures to include in the video of the characters, and I came across illustrations. Now, I don't know if they're, like, official artist illustrations of what the characters look like. They're official, or they're just fan illustrations based on what the characters' descriptions are. But Jinya, like, when I saw her, what she looks, or at least maybe what she looks like in the book, she has an eye patch. Because I do believe her right eye it looks like there's a fogginess to its color, so I think she might be blind in that eye, so she might kind of wear an eye patch to kind of help cover up, like, her eye, but also, like, the scars on her face, potentially, So, I don't remember if the character, like, had, maybe it wasn't Jinya, I might be thinking of a different character, but there was, like, one character I saw that maybe in the books has, like, an eye patch, and it was either Jinya or Zoya. I can't remember which one. But like, the fact that her eye was like that makes me think it, because I could have sworn it was a redhead, but I might also be confusing it with a different character that also has, like, from something else, Trails of Cold Steel, which I'm going to be bringing that up later on. But yeah, a character that has, like, red hair and an eye patch is in that game franchise as well, but I don't know if I'm conflating that, and I'm just mixing up Zoya and Jinya. Once again, it's been a little while since I did the video, so I don't remember who I saw. But either way, Bagra calls him out for what he did. It's like, right, Jinya has been loyal to you, especially all that you've done. You put her in a situation she was forced to deal with the king's abuse over. And I think a lot of times I underestimated that too, of, like, how much, like, she was loyal to Kerrigan enough to do what he asked her to because he took her under her wing. And so that's why she was willing to kind of do a lot for him. But it's also like, yeah, he's the one that perpetuated your abuse by the king's touch and everything else that he did to you. So that cycle of abuse is also on him. Now he's scarred her. Now you're also going to use her as an example to any other Grisha to fall in line. And it's just, for her, it's just a disappointment of, like, how much of a monster he is, how much of a monster she made, and it's like, if she had done things differently. So she puts it on herself, but also he reminds her of, like, I'm only this way because I learned at your knee. Like, basically, you always made me kind of bow down to you. And once again, Bagra's changed, and maybe this Bagra raising, Kerrigan would have been different, but it's like, yeah, once again, as he said in a previous episode, there's no mistakes, only lessons, you know? Later on, though, we do see Bagra. She ends up like breaking herself out of her like shackles because she. Well, I wonder would it be. I would assume it would be the hand that she lost a finger on, but I'm not sure because she still had to break her hand to get out of the cup. So it could have been a thing of like might have been missing her finger. Like I think it was specifically her pinky, but it still probably was still too tight. So had to break her hand. Luckily, she got a tailor right beside her to fix it. They managed to get out. She made sure to smash some of the stuff that it had been working on for Kerrigan. And because he was in a process, we don't know if he actually finished it or not, but he was in a process of grinding up and like processing Bagra's finger as an amplifier for him, for Kerrigan. But we see those two escaping, so they might meet up with Alina later on, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. At the same time that's all going down, we kind of catch up with the royal family as Alina is, sitting with Nikolai and the fam, and they're, talking about eventually, well, her plan is to lead the second army because they need someone right now, especially because it's supposed to be led by Kerrigan and all that's going on right now with the Grisha, and it's like everything that's going on with the first army persecuting Grisha. It's like she feels like they need someone to lead it right now because it kind of puts her and Mal in this interesting spot because she thinks that when this is all said and done, they'll find someone else to lead the Grisha, but the thing is, I think the position is going to stick around a lot longer, and Mal's going to. It might even be a thing of her and Mal might end up on opposite sides. Like Mal might find himself in a position when it's all said and done. We'll see if where things currently stand, whether or not this would be the case. But I think it'd be very poetic of her being the head of the second army and Mal being the head of the first army. Consider he's a deserter. I don't know if he'll be able to be put in that position, but he could be instated in that position because I don't know. I could definitely see that, and I feel like poetically it would make sense, but it might also create because Alina wants to kind of walk away from this, but once you've kind of taken up this position, she might not have a choice in the matter. Obviously, Zoya's not too happy of she is still wet behind the ears. There's no way she'll be ready for this, but it's being Grisha isn't something, it's something you're not made, you're born to, So it's Alina will figure this all out, essentially. Regardless of it all, Zoya's still loyal, being no, I'm gonna back Alina just because I want to make sure Kerrigan fails, and that's enough reason to back her. But also you have Vasily running his mouth about the Grisha and stuff like that. Their mom, I guess, is kind of middle ground. She has no full love for the Grisha, but she doesn't hate them as much as Vasily has such disdain for them, like some people do. So. And this episode also, once again, and referencing Trails of Cold Steel, once again, it's the Trails series as all. The character I was referencing last episode called Prince Oliver, I saw so many parallels between him and Nikolai that even more so in this case because Nikolai is of commoner blood, very much like Oliver. Oliver, the reason why he isn't the crowned prince is because he's the oldest sibling, but he has no direct claim to the throne because he has commoner blood. Same thing with the difference is Prince Oliver's father actually was the king, so he does have royal blood. Whereas Nikolai is my mom is kind of the noble person, but my dad was most likely a commoner. He's I've heard whispers in the castle since I was a kid. So he's always kind of accepted being the bastard child. So I might not have any of the royal blood in my veins, and but he also has to play the role of a royal regardless, and there's only that position doesn't always allow him to be himself. He has to play the role of a royal, especially being once again the backup plan, the public face, the public figure. That's all he is. He's kind of hey, let's trot out the second born prince or whatever, There's also the whole, because obviously the engagement was announced and everything. And then we also had this situation with, what's his face showing up? David, warning about everything that's coming. Obviously, Kerrigan still being alive and what he's capable of now. And these things, the shadows, nothing works against him. No other Grecia's powers, blades, swords or gunfire, nothing works against him. So it's not really the best time to be charging into a fight with Kirigan. We have no means of countering it, which Mel knows that there is a sword that exists in Shuha that might exist that could cut through even shadow. So he wanted to get that, which I think the plan initially was to get it for oh god, Alina, but I am curious is he's going to end up being the one wielding it, because that might be his thing going for it. Like, he has this sword that can kind of potentially cut through anything. Like, if I had to compare it to anything, maybe it's not exactly the same, but if you're familiar with his dark materials, maybe it would be kind of like a subtle knife type of situation. Because especially, like, obviously you can make direct parallels between this series and, like, Avatar: The Last Airbender, putting him kind of in that very, like, Sokka vein where he's not a bender, but he learns how to kind of fight and handle things on his own. And I could definitely, I mean, Mao's always kind of been that character. I mean, obviously, as he got older and joined the army and stuff. But I think that could end up being an interesting thing for his character if he ends up being the one who wields, like, this lightning sword of sorts that could cut through even shadow. So Alina's also training her powers, because she was initially going to try and copy what Kirigan did, trying to use, like, you know, once again, the magic from the journal to boost her own powers. But Mel was kind of like, yeah, don't do that, because you don't know what that will fully cause. So it's like, let me find the Firebird first. But even David was like, you don't want to do that because we don't know the full cost of doing that. Because he also brings up something only Alina and Toila, his sister and Alina are the only ones who heard this about the link still between them. Because once again, as he kind of puts it, there are still fragments of the stag still in his arm and his hand. And that's still, because of that, so that connection, even though it's thin, is still strong enough for Kirigan to act upon it. And I guess, like, the stronger he's got, the more he's able to kind of push that thread a lot further than maybe it normally would be, you know? To the point, he's later on popping up in Alina's head, and she tries to attack him. I was like, is he teleport? But it's like, no, he's not really there. He's able to make her see stuff. But the fact is that he still has so much sway over her, because he touches her and she can't really do anything. She's just standing there as her powers kind of, like, undulating a little bit. You also had Vasily making his moves. He got Mal out of the way. I thought, well, he was doing that just to hurt Alina. But it was also because he knows that's someone she cares about, and I guess he was using that as setup for later. But because then he later on approaches her being like, hey, my brother, like, he's not the royal you should be, like, smoozing towards. It should be me. Like, first commander, second commander. That kind of also plays into what I was talking about, like, Mao potentially taking over that front. Especially because, as, you know, jumping ahead a little bit, as we know, that position is super open now, leading the first, he's in charge of the first army, so it's like, but that's a royal thing. Like, I'm sure there's a commanding officer that kind of leads them, but still has to take orders from Vasily, obviously. But yeah, his douchebaggery knows no bounds. I even love that Lena tried to point out, like, oh yeah, like all the brothels and shady stuff that you're up to, which he was, like, really upset when she kind of referenced all that. So also I'd be like, you know, back down your royalness, your royal douchebagginess, because Alina could snap you like a twig and, like, hurt you, but it's like, well, she can't do that either. You know, you're to be a fake in-law soon enough. But once again, the bastard gets what's coming to him, rightfully so, because even once again, Nikolai being the, because even Alina can see, like, she even told Nikolai, it's like, right, your brother only cares about the power, but you, she's like, I legitimately do believe that you care about Ravka, and you would be the right one to lead. You should have the crown because you are someone who actually cares about the people. So, but yeah, like, Vasily, like, invited a whole bunch of other people, and it's like, yeah, but these are some of the more debaucherous people, you know, like some very, like some very bad people, and it's like, you invite them here, and that's just going to bring Kerrigan to our location, and we need to be kept secret. And yeah, it happened. And boy, oh boy, did he get murdered super hard. He got ripped in half, I believe. It's like, yeah, you got what you deserve, you prick. All the freaking Grisha you killed, plus your pride and your idiocracy led to all of this. And once again, the sad thing is, I mean, you got what you deserve, but sadly you won't be around to have your brother kind of smack some sense into you, because he was about to stand up there and I guess wax poetically about tearing his brother down. It seemed like he was going to tell Alina something about his brother, like, oh, you don't really know my brother like I know him. Whether there was going to be more to that, we don't know. If it was just him trying to embarrass his brother or try to tear him down, or maybe use his situation to kind of poke holes into Alina and his coming together, because it's like, oh, I know about you and Mal, and he probably would have referenced Mal being taken to be court-martialed by the Second Army. The First Army. But yeah, that's all a moot point now, because we have no idea what he would have finished saying, because, well, he's dead now, along with a lot of other people when the shadow creatures bust through. Then Kerrigan himself shows up, especially coming after Alina, saying hey, when it's all said and done, I'm the only person that won't turn away from you. I've seen what you are. I've always accepted you for what you are. Can you say the truth is about the others? But it's yeah, once again, you only want me for power. All you're ever doing, everything you're doing is for power, because you need me to help you take control of this country. She's the only reason why you don't want me, because he's saying right, take down the foe. Do you think it really will help Ravka and unite it the way you think it will? I don't think it will. There still will be issues, but it's at least the first steps. But it's yeah, you only want me to keep the fold. You want to keep the fold up, because if it's taken down, the one thing in this world that you have left is gone, because you have nothing else. You have people who are loyal to you, but not because of loyalty, because out of fear. You've also, Alina will never come to your side. Zoya wants your destruction. Jinya wants your destruction, even though he's yeah, I did fancy her at one point in time, but she betrayed me. So it's you have nothing and no one on your side, when Alina has, yes, a good chunk of allies on her side, when she kind of has everything while you have nothing. And I think that kind of plays into it, why he feels the need to even more so claim Alina, because he needs something, because he has nothing and no one on his side. He's all alone, except for the people he forces to kind of, be on his side. I also got what I wanted last episode to some extent. This episode, but I brought it up they referenced the whole thing of Kerrigan being the only one who can do the cut, aside from his mom. And this episode, Alina wanted to learn how to do the cut, but it's yeah, but that'll kind of lead to a fear situation. But even Toya's sister was yeah, but sometimes I use my weapons, and that's enough to kind of strike fear into people before stuff even has to, get to that rumble-tumble side of things. But we do see Alina focusing on her hatred for Kerrigan. It did lead to something of a slash. It's yeah, it's kind of not quite the cut, but it's something along those lines. She didn't get to utilize it again in the episode, but because she's trying to figure things out now with the amplifiers, with the new amplifiers of the C-Whip. Because she had brought this up interesting point that with the stag, it came natural for her. It's it was like breathing, so her powers are a little more controllable. Now with the C-Whip added, it feels like the power's just too much, but it also feels like it's longing to be reunited with the Firebird as well. The totally, I guess it's one is fine, because the stag gave its power willingly, the C-Whip sadly didn't, so she probably needs to trifecta to fully complete everything to kind of have some reign of control over it. So until then, it will always be incomplete, or maybe just having one is enough, and once you have control over that, but the moment you start adding the second one, you need the third to fully balance it out. It will come down to the Firebird, so we'll have to wait and see. But her and Kerrigan did clash. Also, even with her light powers, it isn't enough to hurt the shadows. What's-her-face's brother did get his arm mangled by that thing. I was about to say, please don't let him get brutally murdered, but luckily he didn't. So they managed to get away from Kerrigan. What happened to Nikolai and his mom and the other people that were there, it's unknown, so we'll have to wait till the next episode to find out the aftermath of all of that. But ultimately, where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.